Hello and welcome back to the Football Forecast. We have a very exciting cast with us, Kweku, Afari and Glenn Murray. So because you're here, there's only one place to start. Brighton against Newcastle. Brighton have been in wonderful form, bar the West Ham game. And Newcastle have had a bit of a topsy-turvy start to the season. It's probably the sort of game where we might get to see who's got a bit of a harder punch, if you like. How are you feeling about Brighton so far?
So far, so good. I think if there's a way to lose a game, it's by dominating the stats board, and that's what they did against West Ham. They just couldn't break West Ham down, and West Ham's game plan on the afternoon worked to a T. I think we were forced into a few errors, but yeah, I think it's been a really good start, but a very tough fixture on Saturday.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's going to be an interesting one as well. Both of these teams are going to be licking their wounds. Obviously, Newcastle suffered that heartbreaking defeat against Liverpool, that dagger at the death from Darwin Núñez. And Brighton, like you say, they absolutely dominated West Ham in terms of possession, in terms of metrics, both advanced and basic. And they were the better team if you go by what the eye told you, but West Ham were the more effective team in that game. But Brighton have been great this season. I know that they're everybody's pick. Everybody's fallen in love with Brighton because of the way they go about business, the way they conduct themselves, the way they play football as well. But Newcastle are a very, very good team. They're finishing the top four for a reason. If you go by the chatter, it sounded like Brighton finished ahead of Newcastle last season, but they didn't. And Newcastle are a top four team. They're in the Champions League for a reason. So it's going to be a tough game for both sides, but both sides do need a win.
What's interesting here is last season Newcastle lost a total of 5 matches. If they lose this, they've lost 3 straight. Is that possibly pressure? Is that possibly trying to find a more expansive way of playing? Because if you think back to the start of last season, you sort of watched Newcastle. They were a little bit more pragmatic, a little bit slower in possession. They were very unlucky against Liverpool. On any other day, they probably at least leave with a point. But coming into this, Brighton will be expansive, explosive. Newcastle will have to play up to that. Maybe last season they didn't have to. They could have sat back. Could have been a little bit more boring to watch. Do you think there's more pressure on them this season?
I feel as though when you look at Newcastle, you've got to take into consideration who they're up against. Man City, the best team in the land at the moment, treble winners last year. So that's one of those games where they pushed them close. It was a tough game, and I think you've got to take into consideration also the Liverpool game. They were in dominant, they were in complete control of the game, and it was 2 sucker punches, one which came off the Botman's backside and backheeled into Núñez's path, and things like that you can't account for sort of as you're leading into the game. It was a stroke of luck, I suppose, from Liverpool's point of view. And I actually think when Newcastle go 1-0 up and Liverpool get a man sent off, I think against any other team in the Premier League, they go for the jugular. St James's Park, loud and proud, baying for blood almost. I think they do go for the jugular on any other team, but Liverpool just seem to have a hold on Newcastle at the moment. I think Eddie Howe had lost 5 games, something like that, and 3 of them had been against Jurgen Klopp's side. Eddie Howe also, in 11 attempts, hasn't beat Jurgen Klopp.
Is that a real thing? Do you think that...
Yeah, that's a fact.
Yeah. Well done, Glenn, you pulled it to facts. The sort of idea that a manager can't get past another manager, or a team always has one up on a team. Yeah. Do you think that actually plays a part when you actually go out?
I think it becomes a thing, and I think even if you don't want it to be a thing, I think subconsciously it's because all the chatter leading into the game. So I think both on the field and off the field, Liverpool had sort of, I suppose the best way to put it is a subconscious hold over Newcastle, because like I say, any other team, they go for the jugular at 1-0 up and playing a team with 10 men, but they were cautious. And eventually that led to Liverpool getting back into it.
I think that's it. It's how cautious they were, because we know how great Liverpool have been against Newcastle and how great Klopp's been against Eddie Howe. If you look at Newcastle's first 4 fixtures, though, they have probably had the toughest 4 fixtures in the Premier League. They played against Villa, who everybody fancied, and they dismantled them in the first game of the season. City, then Liverpool, and now Brighton. 4 difficult fixtures, but then you look at the fixtures post the international break, they've got Brentford, Sheffield United and Burnley in the league. That's where they'll pick up the majority of their points, because they were very good against those type of sides last season. It's just been a tough start to the season for Newcastle in terms of the people they played against, but I do back them to have a very strong season. Obviously the elephant in the room is contending with Champions League football. We know that's going to be very, very taxing for them. But in terms of the makeup of their team, it's very well suited to Premier League football. It's very well suited to going to an opposition's ground and getting some points. Well suited to playing at home. I just think against Liverpool, they're psychological for that one.
And I think also, just touching on your pragmatic point, and I do agree they were, but I think the signings they've made this summer in Lewis Hall at left back and Livramento right back, I feel as though they're full backs or even wing backs that will really drive Newcastle forward in coming years and make them more attacking.
One thing in terms of Brighton, I'm sure Brighton fans are sat here watching thinking, I know Newcastle are the bigger side, but like you said, Brighton, you sort of have a feeling that everyone likes them. They're a very likeable side. They play very good football. When West Ham beat them 3-0, I think most people spoke about how bad Brighton were, whereas I actually thought West Ham played brilliantly and the tactics that they had were on point. The one area of Brighton that we can't seem to figure out is who's playing up front. The rotation of De Zerbi. This rotation thing's actually quite annoying if you're an FPL manager. I've got João Pedro up front, and 1 week
I feel your pain.
he's in and out. Then obviously Evan Ferguson's played, who probably feels like the most natural 9. If you want to score goals, he's probably your guy. Who do you think should be the main man?
Botman's going to be out for Newcastle, right?
Yeah.
I think Evan Ferguson up against Sharon.
Why? If Botman was in, would you not play Ferguson?
I probably still will play Ferguson. I really like Ferguson, but maybe you play a striker that drops a little bit deeper and makes them think about going out positions that they're comfortable in. I think Evan Ferguson will be licking his chops to the fact that he's playing against a Newcastle team that haven't got Botman, who's been one of the best centre backs in the country since he's moved to England. But I would like to see a more consistent lineup off your point, Nubaid, in terms of Brighton. They've got players that can have an impact and are very, very effective. Like I say, FPL managers, if you've had Brighton players in since the beginning of the season, you're laughing. But you want to see some more consistency because that's what breeds results eventually. And I like the look and the makeup of this Brighton side. And I think without Botman and Newcastle, they've got a great chance of getting something in this game.
When you have a centre-back like... I have no idea why Glenn's delighted to be speaking to me. He's grinning ear to ear. I've been sat here the whole time. You've got Welbeck, who started up front in the last game and struggled a little bit. He also played as a midfielder, third midfielder last season, as sort of like an advanced 8. That was also interesting. And then you have João Pedro, who against Luton was really lively. But the one criticism of him has always been that in the final third, he doesn't put the ball in the back of the net often enough. Surely then you go, Evan Ferguson's got to play every single week.
Yeah, listen, it's a great position to be in because they've got options ultimately. And Cisso's a big loss but with his knee injury because he was the one that I would probably say is most suited to the 10. So the West Ham result was very similar to me to the Everton result at the end of last season. So I think we're going to see a sort of a blueprint of what teams are going to do when they come down to the Amex, saying sort of the bottom half and just above that. I mean, obviously the big team's going to come and they're going to play their way, even though probably Manchester United didn't in the semi-final of the FA Cup. So I think first and foremost you've got to take a step back and be like, teams are coming to our backyard and they're respecting us first and foremost, and it's about how we break them down there. And I think, like I said, Cisso's the 10, the one that can really unlock. I think Adam Lallana can as well if he stays fit and we can get him in there. Like Kweku said, I think Evan is the most natural 9, and then João. It's a learning curve for João. João's been at Watford, which I would say is a football club without much structure. He was the superstar of the club, so they wanted to keep him by hook or by crook. So he was allowed to roam the field, and especially in the Championship, I think his talents are so good that he was literally allowed to drop anywhere, do anything he wanted, get him on the ball and trying to create things, whereas Brighton is much more structured. Roberto De Zerbi, if he's starting as a 9, will want him to stay more predominantly as a 9. So I think João will only get better and better. And as for Danny, I personally like Danny coming in off the left, but Mitoma's there. So in the long run, options are better than having a limited amount of people. And to be honest, when I look at Brighton during these opening weekends of the season, I don't think they've hit their stride yet.
Newcastle on the flip side, they've got a striker problem as well, but I think theirs is far more structured. You kind of know that you've got two guys who can both score goals. Newcastle had 60% possession against Liverpool. Isak only had 1 shot, whereas Wilson came on 2 shots in 18 minutes. If you had to pick between them two, I personally don't know why he didn't start both. I think there was a period last season, I think if you want to attack teams and you want to have a go, I would personally go with Wilson and Isak up top, especially in a game like this where both teams, you feel like they have to win to sort of assert themselves on where they are this season. Is playing both a bad idea?
It's not out of the question. I like both of their profiles in terms of strikers. I really like what I saw from Isak at the back end of last season. He showed glimpses of magic. If you look at the West Ham game, the Brighton West Ham game, West Ham caught Brighton transition. I think if Newcastle are looking to play in transition, Isak's probably the striker who's better suited to that. But like you say, there's room for both of them in that team. Isak can obviously play from wide areas, and Callum Wilson's a proven goal scorer who's deadly in and around the box. I would opt for Isak to start and Wilson maybe as an effective sub off the bench, but I can see why you'd argue for both of them being in the starting 11.
See, I think that's more of a happy partnership rather than rival teammates. Yeah, as in, I'd be delighted to be Callum Wilson right now. Isak does all my running, he ties the defenders out, and you get on when the game opens up in the last 20 minutes. It's like the perfect scenario. Callum will score goals, but I do think it can be flipped as well. I think Callum can lead that line, and therefore Isak could be sat on the bench thinking, last 20 minutes, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to run at tied defenders. So I think it's a really sort of a good partnership they've got going.
Would you have liked to have played with a player like Isak in terms of would he have brought the best out of your game?
I probably would want the best out of him. He wouldn't make me any faster.
Very quickly then, predictions.
It's a tough one. I'm sitting on the fence here. 2-2 draw.
Yeah, this is a real tough one, because when you think about Newcastle losing 3 on the spin, I just can't see that happening in the first 4 games of the season. Yeah, I mean, it's been notoriously tight. I think the only tight game was at the end of last season when it was sandwiched in between a couple of important fixtures for Brighton. So I'm going to go for a tight 2-1 win Brighton.
I was thinking the same as both of you.
I was going to sit on the fence, but I can't.
Got to go brave. I can't see anything past the draw. I don't think either of these two sides will want to lose. I think Eddie Howe's much more tactically, I guess, astute than what people give him credit for. Obviously, we love De Zerbi's tactics. I'm going to go 1-1, but I think it'll be a very, very good game. Let us know what you think in the comments below.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.